Now, as the first female Secretary of State, you did have a weapon that any former Secretary of State did not have, and that was pins. You said you had pins with attitude replaced power ties. And this really delightful book where you talk about your pins. Now, you described that you use pins to send a message. So tell us how it first began with your serpent pin.
Right. Well, first of all, I do like jewelry. So what happened is I had some jewelry, and I got to the United Nations in February 1993, and it was after the Gulf War. And we had a number of different sanctions resolutions against Iraq because they had invaded Kuwait. And my instructions from Washington were on a regular basis to say perfectly horrible things about Saddam Hussein, which he deserved because he had invaded an independent country and trashed it and taken prisoners and done horrible things. And so, and plus we thought that he had a variety of weapons of mass destruction. So all of a sudden a poem appeared in the papers in Baghdad, which among other things compared me to an unparalleled serpent. And I happened to have a snake pin. So I wore the snake pin when we were dealing with Iraq, and I went out, and I think you've all seen pictures when you come out of the Security Council, there are reporters and everything around, and a camera zeroed in and said, "Why are you wearing that snake pin?" And I said, "Because Saddam Hussein called me an unparalleled serpent." So then I thought, well, this is fun. So I went out and I bought a bunch of costume jewelry that would reflect what it was I thought we were going to do during the day or what my mood was. So when I was in a good mood, I wore butterflies and balloons and flowers. And when I was in a bad mood, I wore spiders and bees and various things. And so people would finally say, why are you, what are we going to do today? And if you remember, the first President Bush had said, read my lips, no new taxes. So I said, read my pins. And that is how it began. And it really was great. I was the only woman on the Security Council. I had already decided, I love being a woman, and I decided I didn't want to dress like a man. I wore bright colors and then the pins, and so that's how it began. And finally, they began to get the picture about what it was I was signaling.
There are great pictures in the book. There's a bee when you're talking to Yasser Arafat. There's an elegant zebra with Nelson Mandela. So how much time did you wind up spending deciding what pin to wear to match the occasion?
No. I mean, I don't want everybody to think I'm a raving lunatic.
We don't.
Had no strategic plan for this. And I don't wake up every morning thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? Mostly it was kind of serendipitous. I did think it was useful on certain occasions to kind of have a very deliberate message. Sometimes I have to admit I made up the message after I'd chosen the pin. But I knew I wanted to wear the bee with Arafat. I wore so many different pins on Middle East issues because they went on forever. It began really in the Middle East. Leah Rabin, the widow of the assassinated prime minister, gave me a dove pin. So whenever I did a Middle East speech, I wore the dove pin. And then I arrived in Jerusalem one time in order to find a necklace of doves with a note from her saying, in the Middle East, a dove needs a lot of reinforcements. Then I also had, when I was hopeful, balloons. They turned into turtles because it was all slow. And then ultimately crabs when I got so irritated at the people. But I knew that I was going to have to deliver a stinging message to Arafat. He at some point gave me a butterfly, so it was, Muhammad Ali, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. So,
well, my final question is, of course, you have a large fly on your shoulder. Why did you choose that pin for today?
Well, I chose it because I wanted to show that I was not a fly-by-night friend to Chicago. I lived here, and I love coming back. So,
and on that note, we'd like to take some questions for the Secretary. Just come up to the microphone that this gentleman is placed right there.
Okay, folks, Dave Anderson again. A couple observations and then a couple ground rules. Freedom Project believes deeply in the value and importance of the First Amendment and freedom of expression. Feel free to express yourselves. Please, even that includes displeasure. Please do it appropriately because we also believe in respect and responsibility. We have a number of steps we'll take if somebody decides that they want to monopolize the mic. That'll include turning it off, and if that doesn't work, we'll ask you to leave. So with that, if you have questions, this is the microphone you can use, and come on up. We know you have them.
One issue which didn't come up in your discussion was the climate resiliency issue and what we expect our government to advocate at Copenhagen in December 2009.
I don't understand. I'm sorry. Can you
back off the microphone a little bit?
No, it's a question of what we can expect from the Obama administration at Copenhagen in December of 2009 on the post-Kyoto Treaty. I know a year ago, Kim Campbell, the former Prime Minister of Canada, speaking in Chicago, said that we must have 80 to 100% reductions if we're to maintain the resiliency of the climate. So I wonder what you would expect we can discern from the Obama administration in our negotiations at Copenhagen to have a new treaty.
To the extent that I could understand all of it, it was about what was going to happen in Copenhagen. I do think that the issue of energy and environment are crucial issues. And in my memo to the President, I wrote about 5 big umbrella issues, and I won't go through all of them, but dealing with energy and environment was one of the basic aspects of it. I, last summer, actually went on a trip to the Arctic, and what was so interesting is even though we were up all the way in the archipelago of Norway on an icebreaker, it took us 2 days to hit heavy ice, which for me was so symbolic of the fact that everything that people have said about global warming was very evident there. I think that it is very important for the United States to take a lead on the environmental talks, and what has happened is President Obama has appointed, he's got Carol Browner, who actually used to be one of my business partners, is now the person that is trying to coordinate the energy and environment issues, working on trying to get legislation passed on the Hill and getting ready for Copenhagen. In some ways, Copenhagen comes very early in the administration. I argued Tokyo, which was the last thing that happened in the Clinton administration, came too late. There were arguments about how the developed and developing countries would deal with emissions, and it came late and it was hard to get through. Copenhagen is coming early in some ways because the priorities for the administration are huge with the financial crisis and now Afghanistan. And so it is not all the people are in place. There are the problems with the legislation, but it's my belief that President Obama is very committed to the environmental agenda, and the people around him are, and there will be progress, but it will not be, and this is just my opinion, there won't be any final resolution. There's also action within the United Nations. The Secretary General Ban Ki-moon had a climate conference during the General Assembly session or just before it began. So there is momentum. What is troubling to me as I've looked at, there were some numbers that came out, I think yesterday that I saw on TV, that environment is not something that is grabbing people's attention in terms of all the priorities that are out there. I do find it still passing strange that there can be people that are candidates for office in the United States who don't believe that there is something like global warming. So you have to get the support of the American public, you have to get everybody in place, and then deal with very complex issues that require a balance between the developing and developed countries.